Apologies for that. Continuing on. All right. What is the purpose of voir dire? All right, voir dire. Okay. It literally translated from the French. I don't speak French. Is the process of questioning the jury. This is translated to speak the truth. Voir dire evaluates jurors to ensure that they're qualified, impartial, and free of bias before being seated on the jury. So both attorneys will ask the person, do you have any bias against the defendant? Do you have any bias against, let's say, the race of the defendant, for example? Okay. This process of jury questioning is used by attorneys and by the courts to make sure that the individuals seated on the jury can be as impartial as possible. Okay. Both attorneys and judges assess and look for any bias or conflicts of interest that may affect jury decision making. Because if you've got somebody on the jury rather, and they're like the second cousin of one of the litigants or the accused, again, that could be a potential conflict of interest. And attorneys are often very strategic in who they choose to sit on a jury, right? Jury selection protects fairness and allows the parties to shape the jury strategically. If somebody says, you've got a situation of, let's say, police brutality, and you've got somebody who says, I don't like cops, I don't trust cops, cops are all corrupt, things like that. Obviously, that person already has an inherent bias, and that person would not be good to sit on a jury. So this is the type of strategic thinking and strategic jury selection that attorneys perform when they are selecting juries. Okay, there are three major types of jury selection challenges. All right, we're going to talk about two. One is challenges for cause. All right, this allows the removal of jurors who show clear bias or an inability to be impartial. In my previous example, someone who clearly says, I don't like cops because I think cops are all corrupt. And you've got the case of someone who's, let's say, a police officer is being accused of wrongdoing. Well, in a case like that, that juror who said that can be dismissed, or rather, not dismissed, but not seated on the jury for cause. There's a legitimate reason why this person should not be on the jury. Okay? And then you have peremptory challenges. Right? Peremptory challenges enable the parties to remove jurors without stating a reason within certain limitations. But someone can say, and these peremptory challenges, by the way, are limited, usually 3 per every side. Each attorney gets 3 chances to remove people without having to expressly state why they're removing them. Right? Sometimes they'll give like a, peremptory challenge and they'll just give a BS reason. I don't like that person's t-shirt. Okay, I don't like their shoes. Right? But you cannot, let's say, systematically use your peremptory challenges to get rid of people of a certain race off of a jury. Okay? But with peremptory challenges, these are limited. Challenges for cause are not unlimited. Okay? But you can remove them without stating a specific reason. The third type, which isn't listed here, but I'm going to give it to you, is called a challenge to the array or to the makeup of the jury. Let's say you are a black man in the southern United States. Obviously, a racist group like the Ku Klux Klan is anti-black, anti-minority, etc., and it's a relatively small town, and let's say 8 of the potential 12 people seated on the jury are either current or former members of the Ku Klux Klan. Okay, that would be the person, the accused, who's a black man, would say something like, I challenge the array, I challenge the makeup of the jury because it can be harmful to me. So challenges for cause, peremptory challenges, and challenges to the array. But we're going to focus on the first two. These challenges raise concern about potential discrimination and the impact of fairness and having a representative jury. All right, great. Okay. Again, an opening statement. Each side, each attorney provides an opening statement. Okay. And what it is, it's a narrative, it's a preview. Each attorney gives the jury or the judge or both a preview. Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I'm going to present a case, and this is what I'm going to present. The opening statement is a narrative, a spoken narrative that gives the court a preview of the case they plan to present. They're not presenting evidence, they're presenting a preview of their case. Okay. The evidence is then presented by witnesses or exhibits or physical evidence. And the purpose of the evidence is to support the testimony, to support the case of that side, of that attorney. Okay. If you've got a prosecutor who's prosecuting someone for murder and they prosecute a bloody knife with the accused fingerprints on it, that piece of evidence can support that prosecutor's case. Okay. All right. Okay. And then you have witness examination and testimony. Witness testimony is when a witness gets on the stand and speaks and gives sworn testimony as to what they know. Right? First, you have direct examination. All right? Here is where the attorney for that witness's side, so let's say you have a witness for the prosecution, and the prosecutor asks that witness a series of questions. That is called direct examination. But then the other side, the other attorney comes and also asks that witness questions, but obviously to try to get them to speak positively of their client. That's cross examination. Okay, where the other attorney, the opposing counsel, is asking questions of the witness in order to test their consistency, their truthfulness, etc. Okay, and then you have redirect after the person has been cross-examined. Then, depending on what happens, the attorney for that witness's side comes back and asks the person more questions in order to clarify any issues that might have come up during cross-examination. And then you have recross, which is not listed here, but it should be, where, okay, you've had the witness directly examined by the attorney of his or her side, then they've been cross-examined, then they've been redirected, re-examined by their side, and then they're cross-examined a second time, potentially. Okay? And this purpose of back and forth of cross-examination, direct examination, redirect, recross, the purpose is to get to the truth, to get witnesses to speak the truth or to give enough information to the jury or to the judge to extrapolate the truth. All right. All right. Objections. All right. This makes sure that the rules of evidence are followed. Right? And one attorney presents something or says something, or a witness says something that is improper, something that should not be there. All right, the other attorney, if the other attorney is sharp, will say, "I object on the grounds of, relevancy or facts not in evidence, assumes facts not in evidence, or something like that." They'll say, "I object to what this witness has said or what the attorney has said," etc., etc. And the purpose of this primarily is to make sure that due process is maintained. Okay? Exhibits must be authenticated to verify their validity before being admitted into evidence. An exhibit is a piece of physical evidence, okay, that is put into court and said, here's a piece of evidence. But before the court can accept it, both sides have a chance to examine it. They have a chance to test it to make sure that, hey, this is actually legitimate. Okay. All right. Now, most testimony is done by lay people, regular people, witnesses. But then you have expert testimony, experts in a particular field. Let's say you're dealing with a criminal case where certain chemicals were used in a crime. And then you bring in a chemist, someone with a doctorate or PhD in chemistry. That person with a PhD in chemistry in that case would be an expert in that field. So he or she could testify and give opinions regarding the aspects of the chemistry of the case. But in order to be considered an expert in court, they must meet certain standards of reliability, standards of acceptability, such as has been found in the case of Dalbert versus Merrill Dow Pharmaceuticals, where essentially the U.S. Supreme Court said that in order to be considered an expert witness, the court, i.e., the judge, is the one, he or she is the gatekeeper that decides who's an expert and who's not an expert. Okay? Okay. Now, closing arguments. So each side gave an opening. Each side gave them a preview. Now with a closing, it's the opposite. Now all the whole trial has occurred. All the evidence is put there. And now each side gives a summary of their interpretation of how the case went down, how the case transpired. Okay? So the closing is a summary by each attorney, by each side, to say, this is how we presented our case, this is what the other side said, and ladies and gentlemen of the jury, or Mr. or Ms. Judge, this is why you should rule in our favor, as opposed to the other side. Okay? Closing arguments summarize evidence and persuade the jury towards a specific interpretation of the case. All right? And then the judge will give the jury specific instructions with which to deliberate. All right? Jury instructions explain the law, the legal standards, the offenses in a criminal case, as other guides and other legal tools to guide juries during the process of deliberation. Okay? And together, the jury instructions and the closing arguments connect all the evidence together, or it should, in order to give the jury all the tools it needs to render a proper final verdict. All right? Okay? Then the deliberation. They go out into a room and they talk amongst themselves and they decide the case. All right? And then that is the deliberation process where they decide the case. And if they decide, let's say in a criminal case, the person is guilty, the accused is guilty, all right, then the verdict, the decision of the jury will be guilty. If it's not guilty, then they decide he's not guilty or she's not guilty. The verdict, the decision is not guilty. But what if you have a hung jury? Which means they can't decide. No matter how much they talk, no matter how much they engage in the back and forth in the discussion, they cannot decide one way or the other. This is called a hung jury. They can't decide one way or the other. They'll go to the judge and they'll say, Your Honor, we can't decide. And the judge will often say, okay. Well, first, the judge will say, go back and try to figure it out. But after a certain amount of time, the judge will say, okay, you can't decide. I'm declaring a mistrial, meaning this trial pretty much is null and void. Okay. All right. Post verdict motion. So whatever, after there is a decision, then the judge reviews any motions by the attorneys to address any potential legal errors or insufficient issues of evidence, right? Because then the losing party, especially in a criminal case, will say, Your Honor, there was a problem with this, this, and this. And we put a motion for you to ignore or set aside the verdict or whatever else. After a verdict, then the judge will review any motions that the attorneys bring up. All right. Now, what are some criticisms of this system? Well, this is a very costly, the way we do things is very costly. Experts cost money. The system itself, processing, it takes time, energy, money. Okay. It's not like a case doesn't get resolved in a day unless it's a very minor case. Cases take weeks, months, sometimes even longer. Okay, so all right. There's also the issue of resource inequality. Right, unequal resources between parties can influence case outcomes, leading to concerns about fairness and justice. All right, because if you've got someone who's accused of a major crime, but that person is very wealthy, that person can afford the best attorneys, the best experts. Okay, there's a good chance that that person, with his or her money and resources, will have a different outcome than someone who does not have access to the same resources. So there is a question potentially of inequality there. Critics also highlight that advocacy skills may overshadow factual accuracy, causing possible distortion. Meaning what? That you could have such a good attorney that the truth doesn't matter. That's what that means. Okay? You could have someone who's factually guilty, person who's accused, and he or she really did it, but their lawyer is so good that, you know, the jury found them not guilty. Okay? For example. Okay? And these criticisms have sparked different discussions about the need for changes and procedural reforms in the justice system. All right. Okay. So, real quick as a summary, all right, our adversarial system and jury trials are the fundamental core or a key component of American law. Okay. We focus on fundamental fairness and citizen participation. Right? Another key element is the restriction of the power of the state or the government, and to promote and uphold justice through fair and balanced procedures. Doesn't always turn out that way, but that's the goal. Okay, and evaluating legal institutions requires balancing ideals with practicalities and procedural realities. All right, have a great day. I will talk to you soon.